The moral guru is a specific type of narcissist, and there is nothing more mathematically certain than their total collapse. Not a maybe, not a possibility, a certainty. The only variable is timing. You've watched it happen. Someone built a reputation on moral authority, on being the one who saw what others missed, who named the harm others ignored, who held the ethical line others were too compromised to hold. And then you watch that reputation come apart in real time, not gradually, in chunks. There's a specific feeling that comes with that moment. Not betrayal. Betrayal is clean. This is something dirtier. The particular disgust of realizing the person who performed ethics at you was the predator. The one who talked most about harm was causing it. The one who wore the language of care was using it as cover. Here's the claim I'm going to prove. This didn't happen by accident. The collapse wasn't bad luck, wasn't one mistake, wasn't a tragic fall from grace. The collapse was built into the structure from the first day the armor went on. In this video, I'm going to do a full clinical dissection of narcissistic personality disorder in the moral authority space. How the facade is built through love bombing and gaslighting, how it's maintained through coercive control, how it's structurally guaranteed to fall, and what you do with that knowledge once the smoke clears. One thing before we start. Later in this video, I'm going to show you the one specific error every moral guru makes. I call it the narcissistic blind spot. It's the exact mechanism that makes their exposure not just possible, but inevitable. If you don't know what this is yet, you are currently vulnerable to it. Stay for that. This isn't a sympathy piece. This is an autopsy. Let's define the archetype precisely. The moral guru isn't necessarily a religious figure. It's not a cult leader in a compound. It can be a wellness influencer, a startup founder who talks about changing the world, a community organizer, a therapist turned thought leader, a podcaster, a professor, anyone who builds social power through performed virtue. The key word is performed. Because the mask isn't a lie layered on top of truth, the mask is the strategy. It's armor not worn for protection but for conquest. The performance of ethics isn't decoration on top of a real agenda, it is the agenda. Understand this first. Everything else follows from it. The mask has three core components, and once you see them, you can't unsee them. The first is the language of empathy. The moral guru speaks in a vocabulary designed to signal emotional depth. They understand trauma. They honor your experience. They hold space. They validate. They name your pain in ways that feel surgical and precise. This language creates an immediate sense of being seen. The second component is the aesthetic of suffering. The moral guru presents themselves as having come through something. There's a wound in the backstory, a period of darkness, a system that failed them. This isn't accidental. Displayed suffering signals sacrifice, and sacrifice signals legitimacy. Humans defer to those who appear to have paid a cost. The third component is the monopoly on moral authority. The moral guru subtly positions themselves as the arbiter of right and wrong within their domain. They don't just have opinions, they have insight. They don't just disagree, they identify harm. Their interpretive framework becomes the only valid one. Dissent gets reframed as moral failure. This works because of a deep evolutionary bias. Humans are wired to defer to those who signal sacrifice. If someone appears to have given something up for the group, the brain registers them as trustworthy, safe, worth following. The Romans understood this at a civilizational level. The concept of virtus in Roman culture wasn't just private virtue, it was public performance. Caesar wore mourning robes to his daughter's funeral in the forum, not the bedroom. Cicero built entire legal careers on performed grief, performed outrage, performed righteousness. Roman politicians understood that the theater of virtue wasn't separate from politics, it was the foundation of it. The armor isn't worn by accident. It's engineered, iterated, and optimized. The most sophisticated version is the one that no longer feels like a performance to the person wearing it. They've run the loop so many times that the armor and the body have merged. That merger is what makes them dangerous. But before the armor falls, it has to be built. And the building process reveals everything. The moral guru doesn't recruit randomly. They aren't scanning for the strong, the confident, the settled. Those people are expensive. They have existing frameworks. They push back. The moral guru targets the disillusioned and the searching. People in transition, People who have recently lost something, a relationship, a community, an identity, a belief system. People who are smart enough to be dissatisfied with easy answers but not yet grounded enough to resist sophisticated ones. The first offer is always validation. Not information, not wisdom. Validation. I see you. I understand you. They don't. This is love bombing, the opening move of the idealized devalue discard cycle. It's devastatingly effective because the searching person is, by definition, looking for someone who understands them. The moral guru becomes the first person to hold up a mirror that reflects back what the target most wants to see. Their pain acknowledged, their intelligence recognized, their dissatisfaction validated. The language used in this phase is precise and intimate. It creates the sensation of being known. Phrases like, "Most people don't get this, but you clearly do," or "I can see you've been thinking about this at a deeper level." The implication is always the same. You're rare. You're worth my time. The others don't see what I see in you. This isn't warmth. It's calibrated targeting. Then comes the manufactured vulnerability. The guru shares a wound, something personal, something painful. A chapter of their life where they failed or suffered or were misunderstood by the very system they now stand against. This sharing is strategic. It feels like intimacy. What it actually is a disarmament technique. When someone appears vulnerable to you, your defenses drop. You feel trusted. You feel special. You feel obligated to reciprocate. And once you reciprocate, once you share something real about yourself, the dynamic has shifted. They now have information about your psychology that you don't have about theirs. This is asymmetric warfare. By the time you know their name, they know your wounds, your fears, your desires, your weak points. The information exchange has been entirely one-directional while appearing mutual. The Renaissance courts of the 14th and 15th centuries understood this dynamic with cold precision. The most powerful advisors didn't rise on expertise alone. They rose on confessional intimacy. They found ways to hear things, private, fears, humiliations, ambitions, transgressions. Once they had these, they had leverage. The information was rarely used overtly. It didn't need to be. The fact that it existed was enough. The moral guru is doing the same thing, in the language of emotional availability and spiritual openness. Once you're inside the circle, the real architecture begins. The conversion from follower to defender doesn't happen all at once. It happens through a process of gradual investment. First you attend, then you participate, then you contribute, then you recruit. Each step deepens the investment. Each investment makes the previous one harder to abandon. The psychological mechanism here is sunk cost, but more specifically, identity fusion. At a certain point, the movement isn't just something you believe in, it's who you are. Leaving wouldn't just be changing your mind, it would be dismantling your self-concept. The guru understands this, consciously or not. Public praise is the primary currency, getting acknowledged by the guru, praised in front of the group, elevated as an example. It's powerful. It feels like recognition of genuine worth. And because it feels good, you do the things that produce it again. Then the guru withholds it, not permanently, intermittently. This is the behavioral conditioning pattern that B.F. Skinner proved produces the strongest attachment. Unpredictable reward creates stronger loyalty than consistent reward. The brain keeps working to get back to the high. The social cost of doubt is designed early. Within the group's framing, questioning the guru isn't positioned as intellectual exercise, it's positioned as personal moral failure. You're not engaging with a flawed argument. You're not ready. You still have work to do. Your resistance is reframed as your problem, not the guru's. Doubt becomes evidence of your own inadequacy. The inner circle illusion is the masterpiece of the architecture. Everyone in proximity to the guru is made to feel special, like they're one of the few who truly understands. Like their relationship with the guru is qualitatively different from the others. This is the illusion. Everyone believes they're special. No one actually is. The guru is running the same intimacy script with each person simultaneously. None of this requires a cult compound or religious trapping. These exact mechanics appear in mainstream wellness communities, personal development spaces, online coaching programs, academic mentorships, social justice movements, and corporate leadership cultures. The label is absent. The mechanics are identical. Now the trap is set, but every trap has a structural weakness. Pause here for a moment. Look at your own circle right now. Your workplace, your community, your social group. Is there one person everyone is quietly afraid to disagree with? Not afraid because of their position, afraid because disagreeing with them somehow becomes a referendum on your character, where pushing back gets reframed as personal failure, as disloyalty, as not being ready. That's not respect. That's not leadership. That's the first structural beam of coercive control without the label. The person you just thought of, keep them in mind as we go deeper. The guru's private behavior is the inverse of their public doctrine. This isn't a coincidence. It's a structural necessity. Sustained moral performance is psychologically exhausting. The persona requires constant maintenance. Every public interaction is a performance that demands energy. Every word is calculated. Every expression of empathy is deployed strategically. Every display of vulnerability is controlled. That pressure has to go somewhere. Private space becomes the release valve. The person who publicly advocates radical empathy treats staff with contempt behind closed doors. The advocate for financial transparency exploits every private financial opportunity. The voice for boundaries has none of their own. The teacher of non-attachment is deeply controlling attachment to their position. This isn't hypocrisy in the ordinary sense. It's the necessary exhaust of the machine. The contradiction is always visible in hindsight. It's visible in the micro-signals, the flash of irritation when challenged on small things, the sudden coldness when someone fails to serve the image, the inconsistency between how they behave when the camera is on versus when it's off. Former followers, looking back, always describe the moment they first noticed the gap. And they almost always describe having talked themselves out of it. This is motivated reasoning at work. The investment in the guru is so significant that the mind actively suppresses contradictory information. The follower has organized their identity around the guru's validity. Evidence against the guru is therefore evidence against themselves. The mind protects the investment. It explains away the anomalies. It reframes the inconsistencies as complexity, or the guru's humanness, or your failure to understand the full picture. Girolamo Savonarola is the historical anchor here. The Dominican friar who in the 1490s set fire to Florence's cultural luxury, who organized the bonfires of the vanities, who built a following on ferocious public morality. But when scholars studied his private correspondence, what emerged wasn't a prophet. It was a political operator. In 1495, Savonarola wrote directly to Charles VIII of France and 3 other European monarchs, urging them to convene a general council to depose Pope Alexander VI, the Borgia Pope who was his primary obstacle in Rome. This was not a spiritual act. It was geopolitics. He was attempting to use foreign military pressure to remove an enemy. The fire he preached from the pulpit was real, but the direction of the fire was determined by political coordinates, not divine instruction. He also claimed to have prophesied Lorenzo de' Medici's death in April 1492. The problem: the documented version of that prophecy appeared only after Lorenzo died. The sequencing is convenient enough to be the tell. His followers believed in revelation. What they had was a man who understood that the most effective political tool in Renaissance Florence wasn't money or armies, it was the claim of divine sanction. His followers believed in a prophet. What they had was a strategist who understood crowd mechanics well enough to dress calculation in the language of fire. The contradiction grows, and at a certain point, it becomes impossible to contain. Here is where the armor shows its first crack. The first public crack almost never comes from a moral failure. It comes from a power threat. Something challenges the guru's position. A rival emerges. A follower develops independent credibility. An institution pushes back. A public question goes unanswered in a way that exposes the gap. The guru's first response is automatic and always the same. Reframe, redirect, attack the accuser. The specific framing varies. Sometimes it's "this person is misunderstanding my work." Sometimes it's "this is a coordinated attack from people threatened by what we're building." Sometimes it's "this person has issues they haven't dealt with that are distorting their perception." The content changes. The structure is constant. The challenge is never engaged on its merits. It's neutralized by discrediting its source. This is the Darvo pattern. a term coined by psychologist Jennifer Freyd at the University of Oregon in 1997, originally to describe how institutions respond to abuse accusations. It turns out, it maps with disturbing precision onto how individuals respond to any structural challenge: deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. A clinical defense mechanism that functions as a social weapon. Deny, this didn't happen, or it didn't happen the way it's being described. Attack, the person raising this is motivated by malice, instability, or personal failure. Reverse victim and offender. The guru is now the one being harmed. The one raising the concern has become the aggressor. Each move buys time. Each move activates the follower base to defend. Each move makes the accuser pay a social cost. Followers respond to the first crack by doubling down. Not because they've evaluated the evidence, but because doubting the guru means doubting the identity they've built around the guru. The group closes ranks. Former supporters of the accuser go silent. New criticism gets preemptively framed as part of the same attack. The crack doesn't destroy the structure immediately. That's important to understand. The first crack starts a countdown, not a collapse. The structure absorbs it. It may even appear stronger in the short term. The rallying response creates visible solidarity. The guru looks defended, the accuser looks isolated, but the clock is running. The countdown has begun. And now the guru makes their most fatal error. The guru can't stop escalating. This isn't a choice. It's the internal logic of the system. Each successful defense of the mask requires a larger claim. If the first crack was absorbed by positioning the accuser as a misguided person with personal problems, the next threat requires an even stronger framing. The accusations grow, the defenses grow, the claims grow, the stakes grow. This is the narcissistic logic of the performance. Escalation is the only available move. At some point in this cycle, something critical happens. The guru starts believing their own myth. The performance has been so consistent and so consistently validated by the followers that the distinction between the persona and the person collapses from the inside. The guru no longer thinks they're performing. They think they are the thing they've been performing. This is the beginning of the end, and this is the narcissistic blind spot I mentioned at the start. Here's the mechanism. The guru's entire power structure depends on being seen as the moral authority, which means any information that contradicts that authority is, to them, not information, it's an attack. It doesn't get processed as feedback, it gets processed as threat. The very defense system that protected the armor now prevents the armor from being adjusted. They can't hear the thing that would save them because hearing it would require acknowledging the gap between the performance and the reality. And that gap is the one thing they cannot acknowledge. The armor is now the prison. When the guru believed they were performing, there was still a part of them that could calculate strategically, that could read the room, that could course correct when the situation demanded. That part required the distance between self and persona. Once the distance closes, the capacity for strategic self-correction collapses. The guru is now fully inside the story. The overreach takes different forms. The guru who begins claiming special perception that others lack. The guru who starts demanding financial sacrifice, framed as investment in the mission. The guru who publicly destroys a dissenter in a way that's disproportionate, visible, and leaves no ambiguity about the punitive structure underneath the movement. Each of these is the same error. The mask, slipping, not because someone pulled it off, but because the person wearing it forgot it was there. The audience fractures, not all at once, but at the edges. The people on the periphery, who had the lightest investment and the clearest view, begin to disengage, some quietly, some vocally. The inner circle holds, but the geometry of the structure has changed. Alcibiades is the historical parallel. Brilliant, charismatic, capable of extraordinary strategic performance. Athens needed him and feared him simultaneously. He knew how to read a room and how to reframe every situation to his advantage. But he couldn't stop escalating. Every success made the next move larger. Every larger move created a new set of enemies. He was exiled, recalled, exiled again. His brilliance was real. His inability to calibrate the size of his claims was what finished him. The same qualities that made him capable were the ones that made him uncontrollable. The edges are fraying. But the real collapse doesn't come from outside. It comes from inside the machine. The collapse almost always comes from someone who was once a true believer, not a skeptic, not an outsider, not a rival. A person who was inside the structure, who invested deeply, who defended the guru publicly, who at some point saw too much. The psychology of this person is specific. They invested the most, which means they had access to the most. They were trusted with the inner operations. They saw the contradiction engine up close. They absorbed cognitive dissonance over time, explaining it away, rationalizing, compartmentalizing. The cost of maintaining that silence compounds with every new observation. What breaks the loyalty bond is never just one thing. That's important. It's accumulation. Each individual incident can be explained, but at a certain point, the explanations start requiring more energy than the evidence supports. The cost-benefit ratio of silence shifts. The insider doesn't expose the guru out of altruism. That framing is almost always wrong and naive. They do it because the cost of continuing to carry the information finally exceeds the cost of releasing it. This is a structural calculus, not a moral awakening. The moral clarity may come later. The initial move is survival, and here's the brutal elegance of the dynamic. The guru's own tactics are turned against them. The insider knows every move. They know the reframing scripts. They know the Darvo pattern. They know the social isolation techniques. They've watched them deployed on others. When the insider speaks, they preempt the counterattack. They document before disclosing. They align allies before going public. They have the same playbook. They know where the exits are. The guru suddenly faces an adversary who can't be neutralized through the usual means. The accuser can't be dismissed as someone who never really understood the work, because this person was at the center of it. The accuser can't be framed as motivated by personal failure because they were praised publicly. The usual tools don't fit the situation. Brutus is the historical anchor, not a villain, not a jealous rival, but a man who was genuinely committed to an ideal of Roman governance, who invested his credibility, his relationships, his political capital, in the belief that Caesar represented something salvageable within that ideal. The moment Brutus concluded that the investment in the ideal outweighed the investment in the person, the outcome became unavoidable. He moved with precision, with organizational skill, and with the full weight of an insider's knowledge. The point isn't the morality of the act. The point is the mechanism. The insider is the one who, when they move, moves with the full information advantage that proximity provided. The insider speaks, and now the information is in the open. What happens next isn't chaos, it's physics. An information cascade is the moment when individual doubt becomes collective knowledge. It feels sudden. It looks like it came out of nowhere. It didn't. The cascade is the release of pressure that's been building in private for months or years. Every follower who had a nagging doubt and suppressed it. Every person who saw a red flag and explained it away. Every person who felt something was wrong and was told the feeling was their own problem. All of that stored doubt exists in parallel. It hasn't found expression yet. The cascade begins when someone provides permission to doubt publicly. Social proof works in both directions. Humans look to others to calibrate what's safe to say. When the dominant signal in a group is "this person is beyond question," dissent carries high social cost. But when one voice, particularly a credible insider voice, breaks that silence, the calculation changes. Others who were carrying private doubts receive the signal. It's now safe to speak. And they do. The guru's defense mechanisms fail in sequence. The first reframe gets applied. This is a coordinated attack. Some followers accept it, but this time more people are watching with updated priors. The second reframe is applied. The accuser has personal issues, but the accuser is the insider. That script doesn't stick. The third move. There are two sides to every story. By this point, former followers are comparing notes. The pattern emerging from those notes isn't two sides. It's a consistent architecture of behavior replicated across multiple people over multiple years. The pattern becomes undeniable, not through emotion, but through triangulation. Multiple independent accounts, none of which know each other, describing the same specific behavioral sequences. The love-bombing phase, the manufactured intimacy, the escalating demands, the punishment of doubt, the reversal of blame. The same story, different cast. This is the structure of a bank run. No single person's withdrawal causes the bank to fail. But when enough people withdraw simultaneously, the solvency becomes exposed. The bank was technically insolvent the entire time. The withdrawals didn't cause the insolvency. They revealed it. The cascade isn't emotional, it's structural. The guru isn't bankrupt because people left. People left because the guru was already bankrupt. The exposure isn't the collapse, it's the audit. The cascade is now unstoppable. And the guru, for the first time, has no move left. When the narcissistic blind spot finally leads them over the cliff, the armor doesn't just fall off, it shatters. And what's left underneath isn't a person, it's a shroud. The guru's public response to full exposure is itself a performance. When they get caught, they don't stop acting, they just change the script. 3 scripts appear with striking consistency. The first is the tearful confession, public acknowledgement of failure, wrapped in the same empathy language that built the following. I've done harm. I'm devastated by the impact. I'm committed to doing the work. The language is borrowed directly from the therapeutic frameworks the guru weaponized. The framing is still about their feelings, their growth, their journey. The second script is the righteous counterattack. The exposure is reframed as persecution. The accuser is a coordinated campaign. The guru is a visionary being taken down by threatened systems. This script requires a remaining loyal base. The guru is appealing to whatever cohort will still move for them. The third script is strategic disappearance. No statement, no engagement. A period of silence followed by a quiet restart somewhere else. New platform, new framing, new initial audience who doesn't have the prior context. None of these work once the cascade has reached sufficient scared. The audience has already updated their model. The social structure that made those scripts effective no longer exists. The authority that gave the guru interpretive power over events has collapsed. When the guru says, "This is what really happened," there's no longer a captive audience required to accept that framing. Watch the apology video carefully if you can. Watch the hands, the slight tremor when they mention specific names, the micro pause before they reach for the therapeutic language they've used 100 times, the voice that drops half a register when they hit the part they haven't rehearsed, the eyes that shift when they say, "I take full responsibility," and then immediately don't. This is what deception researchers call emotional leakage. The body is betraying the script. Biology doesn't know what PR strategy was agreed on. It just knows the armor is gone, and it reacts to that reality, even while the mind is still trying to recite the lines. The micro-expressions, the swallowed words, the over-controlled stillness that reads as rehearsal rather than sincerity. These aren't accidents. They're the system running on fumes. The tells are everywhere. The false apology is a specific linguistic object, passive constructions. Mistakes were made, not "I did this." Deflection, to anyone who was hurt by my actions. Conditional empathy, not direct acknowledgement. The non-admission admission. I know that my behavior was perceived in ways that caused harm. Validating the perception without accepting the reality. The pivot to the future. Within 3 sentences of any acknowledgement, the focus shifts to healing, growth, what we build from here. A redirect away from accountability and toward the next performance. What the audience actually needs to see is specific. A complete, non-conditional acknowledgement of the specific behavior, its specific impact, with no deflection, no passive construction, no pivot. Just the thing, just the cost, just the people it cost. The shroud doesn't allow that. They've spent so long performing that the truth muscle has simply died. They couldn't be honest now if their life depended on it. The performance is the only tool they have left. The performance fails. And in the silence that follows, something important becomes visible. You feel satisfied watching this happen. Not ashamed, satisfied. Let's talk about why that feeling is legitimate. The satisfaction you feel isn't cruelty. It's not petty enjoyment of someone else's fall. It's something more specific. It's the resolution of cognitive dissonance that was forced on you. Think about the specific moment you first sensed something was off. You probably remember it. A conversation that went sideways when you asked the wrong question. A reaction that was too large for the situation. A story that didn't quite match the previous version. You noticed it, and then you talked yourself out of it. You called yourself uncharitable. You called yourself projecting. You told yourself you didn't have enough context. You saw things. You noticed things. You had reactions that you were taught to override. You felt discomfort that was reframed as your issue. You asked questions that were answered with redirections. You had a perception of reality that the entire social architecture of the group was designed to contradict. And then the collapse happens, and your perception is confirmed. You weren't paranoid, you weren't weak, you weren't projecting. You were reading the situation correctly the whole time. And the system was specifically designed to make you doubt that reading. The satisfaction is the resolution of that forced doubt. Your cognitive architecture corrects itself. The wrongly installed error message deletes. That process has a physical component, a release. That's what catharsis is. Aristotle's original formulation, stripped of the academic softening it's received, was straightforward. Catharsis is the purging of accumulated tension through dramatic resolution, not emotional venting for its own sake. Restoration of equilibrium, the completion of an interrupted process, the body and mind resolving something that was left unfinished. The catharsis you feel when the moral guru falls is exactly that. It's the completion of a process your instinct started when the first red flag appeared, a process interrupted by a system that told you not to trust yourself. But here's the danger. Catharsis feels like an endpoint. It isn't. Satisfaction without extraction is just entertainment. If you watch the guru fall, feel the relief, and return to exactly the prior patterns, you've consumed the collapse without learning from it. You've had the experience. You haven't built the tool. The real question wasn't it satisfying to watch them fall? The real question is, what does this tell you about the architecture of manipulation that you need to identify earlier, in more subtle forms, in the next environment you enter? Clarity is a weapon, but only if you know how to use it. The collapse of the moral guru is the most efficient education you'll ever receive. It's a complete course in how power actually works, delivered at full resolution, with real stakes, against real people, in real time. You paid tuition. You might as well extract the full curriculum. Lesson 1. Power always reveals itself. The tells were there from the beginning. They're always there. You just didn't have the framework to read them yet. The contempt that flashed before the empathy mask returned. The outsized reaction to a minor challenge. The sudden coldness when someone failed to serve the image. These aren't random. They're the system operating under stress. Learn to read stress responses early. That's where the real architecture shows. Lesson 2. The language of empathy is the most sophisticated camouflage ever invented. And camouflage works precisely because it looks like the environment. A soldier in a ghillie suit doesn't look like a threat. He looks like a bush. The moral guru doesn't look like a predator. They look like a healer. Empathy language is almost universally understood as a signal of safety. The guru figured this out and weaponized it. Once you understand that empathy language can be a delivery mechanism for the opposite of empathy, you never read it the same way again. You start listening not for what the language says, but for what the actions beneath it produce. Lesson 3. The people most loudly opposed to hierarchy are often the most ruthlessly hierarchical. This is consistent enough to be a diagnostic tool. The intensity of the public opposition to hierarchy is frequently proportional to the covertness of the personal investment in it. The guru who builds horizontal communities is almost always the center around which every relationship orbits. The flatness is the performance. The hub is the reality. Lesson 4. Your desire to belong wasn't weakness. It was exploited. There's a precise and important difference. The desire to belong, to be understood, to find community, isn't a character defect. It's fundamental human architecture. The guru identified that architecture and applied pressure to it. That isn't your failure. That's predatory skill. Understanding the difference is necessary because confusing them produces either false self-blame or false cynicism, and both blind you. Lesson 5. The mask always has a seam. The place to look is where the performance requires the most effort, where there's the highest gap between what's publicly claimed and what the organizational structure actually requires of people around the guru, where followers are asked to work hardest to maintain the cognitive structure. The seam is always there. The skill is learning where to look. Machiavelli's core insight is useful here. And understand something about Machiavelli before you use him. He wasn't evil. He was accurate. That's why people have been trying to discredit him for 500 years. In The Prince, he doesn't prescribe virtue. He describes it as a tool, the same way you describe a lever or a blade. His effective prince understands virtue as a performance because he's himself performing it strategically. This makes him uniquely equipped to see through the performance in others. He doesn't ask, is this person virtuous? He asks, what does this performance of virtue produce, and who benefits? That question cuts through every mask instantly. The uncomfortable truth isn't that Machiavelli was dark, it's that he was right. You have the map now. The question is whether you use it. The moral guru isn't a rare anomaly. The archetype repeats. In every domain, in every generation. The costume changes. The mechanics are constant. 5 early detection signals. The first is love bombing disguised as mentorship. The initial level of attention and investment is disproportionate to what's warranted at that stage of a relationship. If someone's enthusiasm for you feels faster than your actual track record justifies, that gap is information. Genuine mentors invest proportionally to demonstrated potential. Love bombing invests in order to create debt. The second signal is the monopoly on interpretation. The guru is the definitive lens through which all events in the domain are understood. Alternative frameworks aren't engaged, they're dismissed. Questions that point to inconsistencies aren't explored, they're redirected. When you find yourself in an environment where one person's interpretation is the operating system and alternatives are treated as errors, you're inside a controlled framework. The third signal is the punishment of doubt. In healthy structures, questions change things. People respond to concerns with information, revision, or honest acknowledgement of limitations. In the guru's structure, questions are responded to with social friction. The questioner is the problem. Their doubt reveals their inadequacy. If voicing a concern costs you social capital, the social structure is designed to suppress information. That suppression serves someone. The fourth signal is asymmetric vulnerability. The guru appears to share, but what they share is controlled, strategic, and always serves to deepen your investment without actually deepening theirs. You know more about their curated wound narrative than they know about anything real in your life. The vulnerability exchange is one-directional. That asymmetry is the tell. The fifth signal is escalating sacrifice demands. The cost of belonging increases over time. This is always framed as investment in the mission, proof of commitment, demonstration of genuine alignment. In healthy organizations, contribution is reciprocal. In the guru's structure, the flow is directional. Resources, time, attention, loyalty all flow toward the center. The ratio never inverts. The language test is specific. And I'm going to give you 3 exact phrases to watch for. Not categories, but the actual sentences, because once you hear the mechanics, you'll hear them everywhere. Phrase 1, I'm just speaking my truth. The dark psychology. The word truth has been replaced with my truth, which is private and personal and therefore unassailable. You can argue with a claim. You can't argue with someone's subjective experience. The phrase preemptively disarms any critique by framing your pushback not as an evaluation of their claims, but as an attack on their inner experience. It sounds vulnerable. It functions as a force field. Phrase 2, I don't have the bandwidth for this right now. The dark psychology. This shuts down the conversation while framing the person raising the concern as the one making unreasonable demands. It deploys the aesthetic of suffering on command. The guru is depleted, overwhelmed, giving everything they have. Your question is costing them something. That cost is now your fault. The implicit message, you are harming me by asking. Most people back down immediately. That's the point. Phrase 3, you need to do your own healing work. This is the master move. It converts your observation about the guru's behavior into a symptom of your unresolved issues. You haven't identified a problem, you've revealed a wound. The guru is no longer the subject of your concern. You are. The conversation has been redirected from their behavior to your psychology. From the outside, it looks like compassionate redirection. From the inside, it's a shutdown with a therapeutic bow on it. When you hear this in response to a direct question about someone's behavior, the translation is simple. I'm not going to answer that, and I'm going to make you feel bad for asking. How to test the structure. Who introduce a small, low-cost disagreement. Disagree gently with one minor point. Observe the response. A genuine leader will engage the substance. A moral guru will register and respond to the act of disagreement itself. The content matters less than the fact of being challenged. Building your own detection system isn't paranoia. Paranoia is undifferentiated suspicion. Calibrated skepticism is pattern recognition applied selectively. It's the skill of distinguishing between genuine authority and performed authority, between someone whose credibility rests on what they produce and someone whose credibility rests on what they claim about themselves. Detection is the first layer, but there's a deeper game. You've identified a moral guru in your environment before the collapse. Now what? 3 strategic options: extract, neutralize, or use the dynamic for your own intelligence gathering. Extraction is often the right move, but requires careful execution. The error most people make is announced extraction, telling the guru or the community that you're leaving and why. This triggers the Darvo response and costs you social capital you may need later. The correct extraction is quiet, graduated, and non-confrontational. You reduce your participation, you soften your endorsement, you expand your external relationships, you create distance without a visible break. Neutralization is relevant when you can't exit the environment completely. A workplace, a family system, a professional network where the guru has significant influence. Neutralization means reducing your exposure, documenting concerning interactions, and building lateral relationships that don't route through the guru's authority structure. You become less dependent on their approval, while remaining technically within their sphere. The intelligence gathering option is the most sophisticated, but requires the most skill and the most care. If you remain visible within the structure while maintaining your own clarity, you're positioned to observe the full architecture. You see who the targets are. You see the recruitment mechanics. You see the contradiction engine operating. This is valuable information, not for exposure, but for calibration. You understand more about how the mechanism works than almost anyone outside it. Confrontation is almost never the right move. This needs to be stated clearly. The moral guru's entire defensive structure is activated by direct challenge. The Darvo pattern deploys immediately. You become the focus of the attack, the accuser who must be discredited. You spend social capital you don't need to spend, and the information you surface goes into a context the guru controls, not one you control. You lose more than you gain. The power of strategic withdrawal is precisely its invisibility. When the collapse eventually comes, and it will come, you need to not be associated with the structure that falls. The people who are adjacent to the guru at the moment of collapse get covered in the debris. The people who made a quiet, early exit are positioned to be sources of clarity rather than compromised participants. The sovereign mind doesn't need to win the argument. It needs to be positioned correctly when the structure falls. That's the diagnostic question. Not how do I expose this person, but where do I need to be standing when this thing comes apart? Now you're not just a witness to the collapse. You're the architect of your own positioning. Zoom out. The moral guru is a symptom. The disease is a culture that's replaced earned authority with performed virtue. In every domain, the currency of credibility has shifted. What you claim about yourself and your values has become more culturally legible than what you build, produce, or demonstrate. The performance of ethics is more visible than ethics. The language of care is more accessible than care itself. The attention economy accelerated the shift. Moral performance is content optimized. It produces engagement. It creates shareable moments. The institutional structures that used to gate authority on demonstrated competence or output have weakened. What replaced them is audience, and audience responds to performance. This isn't new. Every era that elevates moral performance eventually produces a spectacular collapse. The cycle is documented enough to be predictable. Thucydides watched it happen in Athens with crystalline clarity. Think of the Athenian demagogues of the late 5th century BCE as the beta testers. They were the first people to discover that democratic audiences would pay enormous political reward for moral performance. Cleon, Hyperbolus, Cleophon. They spoke the language of the people. They named the elite's corruption. They performed outrage on behalf of the powerless. Cleon was just a podcaster without a microphone. Same mechanics, same audience psychology, same fatal design flaw. They also made catastrophically bad strategic decisions whenever performance and reality required a choice. Thucydides documents this with the kind of calm precision that comes from watching a predictable pattern play out. He notes not just what they did, but how the audience responded. The crowd's need for moral theater overrode its ability to evaluate strategic reality. Athens lost a generation partly because it repeatedly chose the compelling performance over the accurate analysis. 2,500 years later, the beta test is still running. The platform is different. The code is identical. The cold truth is this. In a world of performed virtue, the person who understands the performance has the asymmetric advantage. Not the most moral person, not the loudest person, not the most passionate person. The person who understands the performance, who can see the mechanics, who can read the architecture, who can identify who's performing and who's operating. This isn't cynicism, it's structural literacy. If you can't read the performance, you're a consumer of it, someone else's theater. If you can read it, you're a diagnostician. You see the machinery behind the stage. Which brings us to the only question that matters. Two options, only two. Option 1, become cynical. Take what you've learned about how moral performance operates and apply it universally. Distrust everyone, disengage from community, protect yourself through isolation. Assume that every display of care is a transaction. Every expression of principle is a mask. Every group is a cult in waiting. This is the lazy response. Not because it's comfortable, it isn't, but because it requires no skill. Cynicism is an off switch. It ends the evaluation problem by refusing to evaluate. It produces no leverage. It builds no capacity. It's a form of damage posing as wisdom. Option 2, become calibrated. Use what you've learned to build genuine pattern recognition, genuine alliances, genuine authority. Not based on performance, but on demonstrated reality over time. Calibration is harder. It requires you to develop the same observational capacity the guru used. The ability to read human motivation, to identify performance versus authenticity, to map power dynamics, to understand who is who in any structure. But without the deception, without the extraction, without the exploitation, the calibrated person isn't the one who was never fooled. Everyone gets fooled. The information wasn't available. The pattern wasn't complete yet. Getting fooled at the beginning isn't the diagnostic. What you do with the information afterward is. The sovereign mind is the one who learned from being inside the structure, extracted the curriculum, built the detection system, and can now move through complex social environments with accurate perception rather than forced belief. The guru's collapse wasn't a tragedy for you. It was a field promotion. You paid for a master class in how power actually works, how performance gets built, how loyalty gets manufactured, how collapse becomes inevitable once the structural contradictions reach a threshold. You have the complete model now. The only question is whether you carry it as weight or as equipment. The world doesn't reward the most moral. It rewards the most aware. Not the most cynical, not the most ruthless, the most aware. The person who sees what's actually happening, reads who's actually operating, and builds what's actually durable. You know what the architecture looks like now. You know the recruitment sequence, the loyalty mechanics, the contradiction engine, the cascade. You have the complete diagram. If this level of analysis is what you want more of, subscribe. This channel exists for one purpose: clinical breakdowns of power, manipulation, and the building of genuine strategic sovereignty. The mask is off. The machinery is visible. Now go build something that actually lasts.